Hey, what's up everybody? Rob Marzullo here, Ram Studio Comics. Welcome back. In today's video, I'm painting Orgrim from World of Warcraft, and I think his name's Orgrim Doomhammer, if I'm not mistaken. But I can't say that I know the characters a lot. I've never actually played the game, but I was very inspired by the movie art, the 3D conceptualization and movie shots, stuff like that gets me kind of geeked, and because I'm more of a movie fan than a gamer. I love games, but I actually limit myself because I get highly addicted to them. And from what I've read about this game, I would get highly addicted. So yeah, then I'd get no drawing done, and you wouldn't see anything on here on my channel. So, but yeah, but I love the art. I love the creativity that's expressed within them. So that's what compelled me to do this one. And it's popular, which is nice because more people recognize what I'm doing. And I think the best thing about recognizable characters is you can tell whether or not somebody does a good job with it. If I just sit around drawing my own character, then you don't really know if I'm doing uh, as good of a job, just because it's my character and I know what he looks like, and maybe you don't. So all right, so anyways, this is on the process of the digital painting inside of Manga Studio 5. I'm using a Wacom Intuos 5 to do this particular painting. Reason why I want to make note of that is I generally draw with a Cintiq, but I've had a lot of comments where people are either concerned that they can't draw without a Cintiq, or that maybe I'm only a good artist because I use a Cintiq or whatever, and I'm not going to get into that whole debate. But what I want to express here is I'm actually just testing myself. I necessarily don't have to draw with the Intuos. So I'm doing this for you as a viewer, and then also to test myself and strengthen my own abilities. So if you notice, my work generally just by doing it in this method, I'm sketching more. I'm having to kind of scribble a bit more. But it's not to say that I can't keep refining this and get some really good line work. I've done it. Now, it's not necessarily as needed for paint work because you're going to get in here and paint all these effects. So whether or not you want tight line work, that's going to be up to you as an artist and what you're capable of and what your strong suits are. I consider myself a better line artist than a painter at this point, so I give myself more lines to guide my paint work. Over time, I'm sure it'll change, or at least shift a little bit more where I can just block in big shapes. I actually like watching paintings like that where people throw in those large chunks of color and work down into their finer forms. I can't do that yet. So, see, if you notice there, like me selecting and moving facial features around, that's something that I have to do in my work to kind of place things. So that I feel more confident when I go in with the paint work. So so I just keep soft erasing, as you see there. I'm still working on one layer, obviously, and just using the darker pencil setting. And I just soft erase and then draw back. And if I kept doing that, I could refine this to even the type of line work that I would consider using for comic book illustration. But it would just take me longer. So the only reason why I really segued into using a Cintiq is because I wanted to be faster, and I produce a lot of line work and cross hatching for my Blackstone comics. So for me, it made more sense. But I had to also work up to that financially, because the other big beef that I always hear about is, well, they're just so expensive, and I'm a young artist. How do I, afford one of those? And all I can say is, if you're working traditionally, one of the strongest, there's lots of pros to working digitally, or I'm sorry, traditionally, and one of the biggest ones is you have originals. Now, maybe you're not to the level where you want to try to sell your work, or that your work will sell, but I'm pretty sure that, if you keep practicing, eventually, as an artist, your work will sell at some level. So you just have to justify the cost with working up to it, I guess. So, it's not like I just woke up one day and said, I'm going to be an artist, and I ran out and bought a Cintiq the very next day. I definitely worked up to that. I actually drew with an Intuos for about 5 years. So, all right, so that's that part of the conversation here, or whatever. So now what I'm doing here is I'm actually drawing with the G pen and I'm inking a line around the perimeter of the design, just to create a selection. Now you don't have to create a selection this way. This is just the way I do it. I feel that it gives me a nice clean result, and I do away with the line when I'm done. But what I'm doing is giving myself that selection. I use the magic wand. Then with that quick taskbar that pops up, I use the shrink selection command, and I shrink it 2 pixels behind the line work. Then I invert it, I delete the line work on the outside of it, and then I fill another layer on the inside of it, and I merge that together. So now I've got my sketch line and my merged flat color tone all together, and I start painting away. So that's how I set up the work to kind of give myself, a boundary of my artwork. So now I don't have to worry about painting over the edge of the artwork. It makes my background easier, whatever. The only thing I have to remember to do when I'm done is blur the edge or whatever. All right, so I jump in and I start with the soft brush. I quickly go to smooth watercolor. Like, I look at it like this at this point, that I use the soft brush to get in big shadows and kind of hurry up and punch up some light source and form. And then I use a smooth watercolor to block in some bigger shapes of shadows. And anything where I want a little bit more of a painterly or a hard edge, I kind of go to that smooth watercolor brush. It's a really amazing brush inside of Manga, and I absolutely love it. It's like you apply paint by pushing down, you smooth paint by softly blending away, all in the same process. So to me, that saves a lot of time, and it feels just very natural, even though I haven't really painted naturally, but I would imagine that's what natural painting feels like. So, and when I say that, I mean I have airbrushed a lot over the years, but not like, acrylics or watercolors or whatever. So yeah, so now it's just a process of me going through and mixing up those effects. Now, one of the things that I do a lot with the soft airbrush is I set it to like shadow. You see there it's shadow, and if you look at the lower bottom left, it says combine mode to normal. You'll see that I play around with those, especially the more I progress through the painting. I start to, using like overlay for the combine mode. And keep in mind, combine mode is like blending mode in Photoshop, and you can control it with the brush and with the layer, just like you can in Photoshop. One of the neat things about this program is if you're like me and you're a Photoshop guy, I've used Photoshop for like 18 years or something, then you're going to be really at home with segueing into this program, because there's a lot of the identical shortcut commands. There's a lot of similar ways that it works. It's kind of freaky. It's really close. And then there's just some real strong suits that each one has over the other. Manga Studio, I feel, has a lot more of a artwork production feel to it. So you can kind of produce your artwork a lot better when it comes to digital paintings and comic book illustration, definitely. The inking is one of the strongest suits of it, and then the perspective tools. But that's another whole nother series of videos or whatever. I'll stay on point with this. So if you notice, I'm just grabbing a tone and blocking in, and at first, excuse me, at first I'm kind of I struggled a bit with this one actually, and I don't want to say I almost gave up, but I definitely kind of rethought the process a few times, as I'm doing it. Some of these paintings just come out a lot easier for some reason. I think it's because I'm still a bit new to digital painting in a sense, but yeah, I kind of combated this a bit, and I don't know why that is. I can't really explain that to you. It just happens. Sometimes you feel like you can draw and paint anything, and other times you just feel like maybe I should just set an apple in the corner of the room and just paint that, because that's all I'm going to be good at today, is an apple. And then afterwards I can eat the apple, which is nice. But, so I just had to fight through this. And one of the things that I did learn by this particular process is overlaying lots of colors. And I'm always hesitant about doing that. I don't know why that is, but I'm always scared to like throw a bunch of colors around in my painting. In this one, I didn't. At first, you see I start very kind of almost monochromatic and basic. But then I start throwing in lots of colors, mainly because the reference material, a 3D shot from the movie, had lots of good colors in it. But it's real easy to simplify that and just go with, just some basic versions and some muted versions of that color or those colors. But if you start painting more, you'll realize that, the stuff around you and the things, your subject matter, the things you're painting, have lots of subtle colors and color shifts. One thing that kind of opens you up to that is take a face, a portrait, and just hold the color picker. You can, in both this one and Photoshop, you hold Alt and start selecting around, and you'll notice that just in the face there's all these different colors. And so that's why when you paint something and maybe your faces come out, boring or just not realistic or whatever, it's just because you're probably not adding enough colors and small texture and details. So I try to make sure to add a lot of that in this painting, and I'm not sure that it gets all the way there, but it's a little bit closer than some of my other renditions. So one of my main goals as an artist is just to make sure that, maybe not every painting, but to make sure that every few paintings I progress. And if you can just do that, then you're winning. You're winning the game. Don't feel like you have to make your very next painting be this amazing, miraculous thing. That's a good way to kind of set yourself up for failure. I think that it's better to just enjoy the journey and watch the slow process. And sometimes it's not slow. Sometimes you're going to just nail it, and other times you're not. So it's just good to just enjoy what you're doing, and not, hold yourself over a fire on any of this stuff, or burning coals, or whatever that expression is. And once I get more colors down in my painting, I can start holding the Alt button, which is the color selector, and you'll see it pop up every now and then just keep, basically using my existing painting as a color palette. But I still don't have enough colors down by any means. And if you notice, I'm still painting on one layer for the character. As I progress and I start to feel like I need to tweak things a bit more, I start to add layers. I know not every artist does that. It's just something that I still currently do. But I think the more you progress, you'll start to paint more and more with confidence on one layer. So yeah, just trying to find the form. Now, like I remember even this part, the ear, I struggled with, and it wasn't just the shape of it, it was kind of everything. They had some really great texture and detail in this part, and ears are kind of this funny thing where they have this weird shape already. Well, his definitely does, because it's got a point to it, but their ears themselves are pretty weird, and they're real easy to get wrong. So I kind of battled that here, and you'll see that I kind of keep just hodgepodging around with it. But one of the things to remember about digital painting is that just keep adding and adding, and you can just keep painting back and forth, and sometimes that addition of work overlapping comes out looking really cool. So it's okay to just keep painting over the same area. You see, I'm trying to change the shape and figure that out as well. But I just kind of, I throw in some stippling, I throw in some different tones, I come back and paint light over dark again. So when in doubt, I guess just keep painting, and I don't know, it'll always figure it out that way, I guess, but it definitely seems to work sometimes. And I don't know if it does with this ear. It still looks kind of goofy to me, but and you notice I keep panning back. I'm panning back to check my work. I flipped it early on. I should have been flipping the canvas more. So keep that in mind if you're trying to find flaws in your work. Definitely flip that canvas back and forth. I kind of lost track of that as I kept painting. I guess I just thought it was potentially fine. I'm going to be scared if I flip it now and, his nose is all funky or whatever. Because that happens. It's really weird. You flip the canvas and all of a sudden you see something that just you didn't see. Not exactly sure why that is. Some mental thing there, but... And if you know, be sure to drop it in the comment section below. I think it's just recognition. For some reason, you stare at something for long enough, and you get used to it, even the flaws. But then you flip it, and all of a sudden everything sticks out like a sore thumb. So here's another thing that I do is I go to the highlight brush, and if you notice, it's the soft airbrush, or airbrush, I don't know if it's called soft airbrush, but it's set to highlight, and down at the blending mode, it's set to add glow. And that is a really great feature because you can take any color. So say I'm doing the skin or those teeth or whatever, I can hold Alt, sample that same color, but when I paint back with it, it's going to give me a highlight version of that same color. So I use that to really quickly punch up highlights. And then if I want a bit of a color dodge, like a colored version of whatever color I'm trying to add, I select that color, I paint it in, and I get a nice highlight version of that color and as a light source. So I use that one a lot. It's kind of just a quick way to punch up a form. It reminds me a lot of the dodge tool in Photoshop, but I think just a hair bit better because the coloring, which I think you can do the same thing with color dodge, blending mode in Photoshop, but it's just neat that it's already incorporated into a brush like that. So I start noticing right about here that the face is just really boring. You know, it doesn't have any life to it. So, you know, whenever it doesn't have any life to it, I say, you know, paint more detail and add more color. So tiny little specks, scratch lines, you know, especially this guy is a warrior, so lots of little scratch lines, little shifts of color, sometimes not so little or more, you know, more dramatic. And when in doubt, I just apply some paint and I blend it down. Now here I'm using the blend brush, which also works really well in this program. And then there you see I'm using the dodge kind of effect with the highlight brush. And I vary levels of the opacity on everything, just to kind of get a feel for it. And one thing I want to make mention of real quick, if you don't feel that you're getting accurate settings to what you're doing with what you see me doing here, if you're trying to follow along or whatever, keep in mind that your tablet settings and your hand pressure are two factors that I can't really do for you or explain. You have to just get in there and play around. So I use a Wacom tablet. Even if it's my Intuos, I can get in there and change the pressure sensitivity of it. And I'm also kind of a heavy-handed person, but the more I paint, the more I notice that I can kind of tone down the pressure sensitivity, I guess. I guess it's subjective to the way you're looking at it, but so keep that in mind, that it's just going to be based on how heavy-handed you are, what your settings are, what you're used to. So you got to just play with that stuff, you know. So if you see that my settings on the brush density right there is down to 19, but you get a totally different effect, just means our settings are different somewhere in the driver or the tablet settings themselves. All right, sorry, I just have to make sure to express that because I think so many people immediately go, oh, I'm not getting what he's getting. He's just, you know, better at it or whatever. You know, practice is a lot of this stuff, but then, you know, getting just the right settings down and the use of whatever you're using is a big part as well. Yeah, so the other thing that I start to use a lot as I progress through the painting is I actually use just a pencil tool and even like the G pen. And what I'll do is I'll just turn those down, like with the pencil tool. I'll have to wait and see when I pop back to it. I'll use it set to like a lower opacity, and I'll draw on details. So the thing is with the smooth watercolor brush, you have to kind of press down, get a little bit of paint, and then blend it out. So sometimes for certain things that doesn't work as well for detail work. So I just grab the pencil tool or the G pen, turn the opacity way down, and I detail. And same thing with the airbrush. If I want a small, you know, you see I'm actually filling in details right now with just the airbrush, but I've got it turned really small where it almost looks like a hard brush. So the size of the brushes are very much a part of the creation process as well. I would say that you could do this entire painting with just a soft brush, but you'd have to do a lot of sizing up and sizing down, and you'd have to work a little bit harder than necessary to get some of your hard edge effects. When you can simply grab something that's going to give you a hard edge effect and work with that, and then just blend it down as need be. So it's just a process of figuring that out. When do you want a hard shadow? When do you want a soft shadow? When do you want a hard edge shadow that blends off? Like if you notice that highlight over the his right or his left eyebrow, our right, it starts off as a hard edge to the left, and it blends off into the brow softly. And that's because I use that smooth watercolor to do that, and I blended it off. So it's just taking note of things like that, and as you build up the painting and you incorporate more of that, you start to get a better, I don't know about realism, somewhat of a realism, but just a variety of tones and effect in your work that really help your painting kind of stand out. And I think that's the trickiest part, really. I mean, past that, for me, it's color. Just making colors work together and knowing when to incorporate certain colors. Excuse me. Now, the other thing I do as I start to get a little bit more depth into the face, you can see I'm spending most of my time in the face of the character. Reason being is we identify the most with the face of our characters, so that's where you should put majority of your work. Now here, this is a different effect. I'll add a layer. I actually created a selection off the original layer. You can do that by right-clicking and telling it to select, add selection. But then here I added a flood fill of a solid, and then I softly erased parts to show the highlight on the back of the head, and I blended edges of it to make it look like more of a birthmark or whatever, because that was obviously on the character. So just keep in mind that when it's something like that, I could have tried to paint that in, but it probably would have ruined some of the underlying paintwork that I had already built into the texture and the head of the character, the veins or whatever. So you have to start analyzing parts of your painting and go, it'd make more sense to add a layer, and then I can affect just that layer and then merge it down if need be. And I do that more and more as I progress. So I kind of get this foundational structure, all the little dots, all the little texture lines down. And then if it gets to an area that I'm trying to apply another effect or another series of shadows or even color over top of that area, but I'm afraid that by blending I might wash away some of my detail, that's when I add a layer. So I just want you to be aware of that, because again, some people can paint where they paint everything on one layer and that's just fine for them. I'm not really there yet, but I think that there's a certain amount of detail that you can keep working in by adding layers. So like all these little stipples, I'm still adding that into the character on the main layer, but if I go to blend those areas, I might lose all that and have to paint it back in. So yeah, and then the other thing, I keep looking at it and I'm like, man, it needs more liveliness, color, something, and you see I take a little bit of yellow. Not sure if I had that set to glow or not, but I start using the soft brush set to overlay, even soft light a little bit, hard light, but mainly overlay, or just normal mode even, but with a lower opacity, and I'll start to paint in more color into the face, the body, things like that. So you'll see that later on in the painting. Now here, I was painting the skull around his neck, which I still wish I would have did better, but there's always gonna be parts of your painting you look at, you're like, I wish I would have did that differently, but it's just the way it goes. So but I end up drawing a selection around it. In hindsight, I kind of wish I wouldn't have did it this way, but this allows me to paint it separately. I just copy and paste. Nice thing about Manga Studio too is you copy and paste it, stays right in the same place. Thanks guys, good call. Whoever developed Photoshop, and you copy and paste something and it flips over to the other side, I don't know why it does that, but it does. You got to go copy, and then you got to go up in the link, edit, paste in place, whatever. But here, you copy and paste something, it stays right in the same place, which is nice. So you can paint behind it and on top of it as its own layer. The other way to do it without having to turn everything to a blue line like I did and draw another layer over top is just paint it on its own layer as a solid and then start painting. I don't know why I did that differently here. I don't know why I do some of the things I do. I just do them, and then explain it later. I don't know, but I just did it differently here. So yeah, so I'm just like painting in some texture. I struggled with this too for some reason, which is weird because I've painted some pretty cool bone skull type stuff before and had no problem. But yeah, I don't know. Some days and sometimes you just struggle with certain aspects. I can't even explain why that is. So here I'm trying to get some of the little like grit and grime stuff that was on the skull there, and yeah, just didn't come out as well as I was hoping. But I'm using the pencil brush and then going back with the blend and softening up parts of it. One of the reasons I like to utilize different brushes throughout the painting, even though you could probably do this all with one brush, is because it yields a different result, and therefore those varying degrees of texture, make your painting kind of stand out better. It's not all one texture, one effect. One of the things that I realize the more of the stuff that I paint is that I do a lot of things by contrast, visual contrast. So, like as I paint something in, it makes something else stick out to me. I don't know how else to explain that. I just call it visual contrast. I don't know if that's a technical term or what, but so like I'll paint something and then all of a sudden the background needs something, and then I'll paint something in the background. The shoulder with the spike will need something, and that's why I bounce around a lot, because I'm actually painting to kind of expose other areas of my painting that need work. So in something like this where I have a reference piece that I'm studying, it's not as much of a factor, I guess, because I have that reference piece to study and kind of gain insight from, and what do I need to add next. But I still feel it occurring when I'm painting on stuff like this, and I definitely feel it occurring when I paint just out of my my mind's eye and create my own thing without any reference. And just so you know, like when you study stuff like this, it's a really great thing. It helps your own paintings where you're not going to maybe be looking at anything, even though I think you should pull from reference regardless. One of the things that I tend to do more now is, even if I'm painting, say, I don't know, my character jumping off a building, or doing whatever, I'll still look at other things for the way that light reacts off a building, or the way that, the glares react off a character where the light source is behind them. So even though I'm not, trying to recreate something, I'm still pulling from reference in other aspects, the way that the composition might be, or the way that the, again, the lighting, the color, all that stuff. So I do recommend studying from reference regardless. So there, I'm just, dropping in some more of the little stipple effect. And that's the airbrush with either droplet or spray or blurred spray. I just kind of mix those up just to give it a little bit more grit, and it seems to work pretty well. I don't know that there's even a right or wrong way to do that. I know with skin you can, definitely overdo it, but anything else that you just need a little more texture to, I definitely recommend just painting some of that stuff in. It just saves you time. You can sit there and do it all by hand, but it just gets you a little bit quicker through the process. Now, that little part right there, I don't know if you caught that, but when I'm trying to do straight lines, even with the paintbrush, whatever you're using, you can simply click, hold shift, and it will draw that out. And even shows you interactively the lines. So that's what you were seeing if you notice that. And I recommend doing that whenever you have to get a quick straight edge in your work. It's really fast. Just click, hold shift, click again. And I like that it works with every brush. You can even be using a soft brush while you're painting, and it works just fine. So going back to that smooth watercolor, that's like one of my favorite brushes in this program now. It's just really well done. Sometimes I'll forget that I'm on that brush, and I'll think I'm on the blending brush, and I'll just be blending away, kind of refining my painting. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, if I push down too hard, I get some paint, because I'm actually still on that smooth watercolor. So yeah, kudos to you guys for developing that at Manga Studio land, because that's a really good brush. So here I grab the soft brush, set to overlay. Sometimes I'll even set overlay with black. I kind of like the effect that it gives to the shadow. I don't know if it's any different than normal. It just seems like it is. And I start shading up from the bottom of the character. One of the things to make your characters look more imposing and large scale is to give them a darker shadow at the bottom. So I find myself doing that occasionally. And then I go to the chest hair, which I kind of struggled with. I'm like, God, I don't really paint chest hair that often. Kind of crazy. But this guy's got a lot of chest hair, so I start painting it in. And I'm like, man, it just looks weird. It looks like it's just drawn in with a pencil or something. And probably because I'm using the pencil. But I end up just putting a Gaussian blur on it because I didn't want to sit there and blend all those little hairs. So I just did a quick blur and it worked out pretty well. So yeah, it's good to remember those effects too. That you have Gaussian blur, you've got color correction or color balance, hue saturation sliders, all that fun stuff. You know, the one drawback to Manga Studio in comparison to Photoshop is it doesn't have as much of the color correction and filters as Photoshop. That's probably the only thing, and past that, it's pretty much extremely comparable. So here's the other method I was talking about, where you just go straight to paint. You know, if it's a basic shape, or if you've got a good enough line rendition down or whatever, you can really just paint your large shapes in. You know, like I'm doing with the necklace. I actually did the bones on the necklace and the necklace itself on separate layers. And that makes for a really quick way of painting, because you can just lock transparency on those and start painting in the confinements of that area. So certain things, especially like overlapping things like a necklace, like a belt, like, you know, whatever, anything you feel yourself struggling with when it comes to hitting the edge of the other parts of your painting, just paint another layer. It saves you a lot of time and energy. It makes it really easy for, like, you know, I'm getting ready to drop in the, well, first I paint in a lot of the texture of the bones and stuff like that. But then when I go to add the drop shadow from the bones to the character's skin, it's just really easy to do that, because I simply paint behind the layer. And if I wanted a little bit more area of edit, I guess, I could just paint another layer in between the two. So, you know, you'll notice I start to get a little layer crazy, but I think for a character like this, it made a lot of sense, because he's got all these little elements to him, you know, and the more elements, the more things that you're, you know, going to run into, edges that you have to blend and worry about. So that's where layers come in really handy. So yeah, just using the highlight brush, that was actually set to normal, and then I go to setting it to add glow, and then I noticed that I painted away a little bit too much of my texture, so I start painting that back in, again with just some little dots and some stipples. And you know, once I get to this level of the painting, I actually start selecting a lot from just what's in the painting. I may grab the occasional color off to the side, but for the most part, I start selecting more and more from the existing painting. And the other thing that I think that really helped this painting do a little bit better than some of the other things that I've painted is, like I said before, I just started incorporating more color. So before I might have, I don't know, maybe used a maximum of 3 colors for the skin tone. And here I end up going a lot further. I end up painting like blue in the facial features, yellow, kind of a reddish orange. So I really try to expand what I was doing before as far as adding more color into the skin tone, and even just a more variety of textures. Like even in the beard, where before I probably should have added more texture of the beard actually, but I used 3 different brushes. I have one that's a hair brush that I created, and then there I'm using actually that's the hair brush right there that I'm using now, and I end up using that. I end up using the pencil. I think even the smooth watercolor, I end up setting one layer to overlay and painting in a little bit more red. So I did a lot more kind of working up in this painting that I do in a lot of my previous digital paintings. So and I've actually done that with my past two paintings, and I really like the effect. So I'm going to start doing that. So essentially, I'm just doing more of a layering process and letting the textures kind of do the work for me. So I recommend doing that. And like even right there, I'm using the darker pencil, which kind of makes a little bit too many stroke lines. Just go back and soft blend them out. You can use the Gaussian blur, but I end up just taking the blending brush and softening up some of that edge work. So here I'm just playing around with the lip texture, which I still feel like I didn't nail it. I was kind of struggling with that part. So I start painting in some color, adding some more little details, some little highlights, and again, just painting my way through it. It's almost like what I mentioned about the ear. Certain parts I just struggle with, and I just keep painting back and forth till I get it. I may go and work on a different part of the painting and come back to it. Sometimes I don't get it at all, and I just gotta look back at the painting and kind of be upset with myself. But hopefully you grow past it one day, and you can always go back to digital work and do a paint over, which is nice. I've actually contemplated that on a few of my pieces now, so I'll learn like how to get the wrinkles in the eyes just right, and then I'll remember a piece where I struggled with that, and I want to go back and repaint it, And then some of them you look back and you realize, God, the whole thing was just horrible, the foundation of it, and I don't even want to paint it over. I want to delete it, So it just, I don't know. It's just a process, I guess, The main thing is just to constantly create new pieces. Everybody asks on my channel here and different things, how to get better, and it's just keep creating. That's all I can tell you. You're just gonna figure things out. Some things I could explain to you right now. Maybe you're watching this video and you're getting some ideas, but they really won't sink in until you apply them. So you just gotta take what you learn here and figure out if it fits into your style of work. Some of this stuff will make perfect sense, and you'll just jump to it and go to town. Other stuff, it's not gonna fit, and you're gonna have to try something different. So it just really depends on what style of painting you do and what type of illustrator you are. We're all extremely different in that way. So, like one of the things that I think opens up the door to your paintings and stuff is like when you see a particular artist and you're a fan of their work and you go, man, I really like the way they do the hair texture, or their rock textures are really cool, or whatever. You just pick something out about the way they do something and it resonates with you and you're really impressed by it. I think a little bit of that is a mental calling. I think that the reason that you're so attracted to it is that possibly might be the next thing you need to learn. I think it goes past just going, oh man, that guy can paint really good, or that girl can do her effects really nicely. I think that you're basically your artistic eye is telling you that you need to study that. That might be the next thing you need to learn even in your work. I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying that I seem to feel that way the more that I create this stuff. And I feel that you can learn something from every artist, and just studying their work, is so essential to grow into that next level. Sometimes you look at something and you go, I want to do what they're doing, which I would say kind of stay away from that thought process a little bit. Don't look at art, and this is just my narrow opinion or idea of this, but don't look at art as a competition. You're not in competition with other artists as much as you're in competition with yourself. It's you trying to grow your own perspective and ability. You can learn from other artists, which is great, but don't constantly compare yourself and think that you're not as good as so-and-so because they do this really well. You just don't know what it took them to get to that level. So it's just better to enjoy the journey and just keep working at it. I'm sorry, I know I repeat that, but I really mean it. I'll get people on the channel say, "Oh, your artwork's so good," and I don't know if I could ever be that good. It's like, of course you could. You just don't know that I've dedicated lots and lots of time to this. So you dedicate lots and lots of time, and guess what? You'll be good too. There's like some mathematical equation to what they consider being an expert at something. And I can't remember what it is. It's something like 5,000 hours, but don't quote me on that. And they say that if you log 5,000 hours into something, you'll be a pro. Or I don't know the exact number. You have to Google it, I guess. But it kind of opens your eyes to, how much practice you really need at something before you can consider yourself even good or that you should expect to be good at it. I think so many people think that they're going to do 5 or 6 paintings and they're going to be a great artist. You're just getting started, so I don't even know where I'm at. I'm at probably 500 or 600 by now, or who knows. I didn't keep track. I wish I would have, I guess. But yeah, so just keep your nose to the grindstone and enjoy what you do. If you enjoy what you paint, then it's all great anyways, right? You're loving what you do, so there's not a wasted day in your life. So if anything, focus more on that. Focus more on what you really enjoy and trying to do more of that. There's going to be times, obviously, when you have to paint what a client needs and pay the bills if you're going to be a working professional. So you got to weigh that as well. So yeah, all right. Anyways, enough of my spiel there. But yeah, so just really repeating the process. I guess that's why I feel it's okay to get into some other topics there, because it's kind of just a repeating of all the same things. So the brushes work really well in this program. You can see I even got a few like little dust shader brushes. I don't use them a lot. I got those from online. I want to say they were from the Friendin set, so you could probably Google that. But I don't use them a lot for this type of stuff. I got those more for just like pencil drawings. I'm going to actually create some brushes where I'll make them available and all that good stuff. But I'm going to do like some different texture brushes. I showed you that hair brush, obviously. I make that with every software that I use. And yeah, I'll just do a variety of texture brushes, and I'll let you know when those are available if you want to get a copy of them. So here I start filling in a background. That's another direct to paint effect. And then I lock transparency on its own layer and just start brushing in some quick textures. I kind of already knew that I was going to blur that out, so I didn't go too far with the detail. Plus, I don't want it to be distracting away from the character. And again, this is where I think about visual contrast. I probably should have kept the blue in the background because it contrasted the character better. But I wanted this dark, ominous feel, and kind of edgy, gamey look. So or gamer look, I should say. So I basically, went with the reddish sky and, that whole thing. Which I don't know, in hindsight, if I should have kept with the blue, but whatever. So I put all that back there, and, I'm kind of making sure I don't add too much detail, especially to the rocks, even the sky, because I want the focus to be on his face, and I want you to pan out from there. So, if you notice, I even kind of pointed the rocks off to the right to kind of point towards his face. Just, again, thinking of composition and trying to direct the viewer just a little bit. So I'm not sure if I nailed that because my composition skills are still a little weak. But you'll notice here I even blur the background a bit, using Gaussian blur. That's what I'm doing right there. And that's the other thing is to create contrast just with things like what's in focus, what's not. I could have desaturated the background colors, which in turn would have made him stand out, or vice versa. So it's always, creating contrast by the way that you create the piece. So at any rate, that's pretty much bringing it to a close. So hopefully this has been beneficial for you. I'm just adding some final touch-ups, blending the edges, adding some edge highlights and things like that to bring him into the background more. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you don't mind, like, share, and subscribe, all that fun stuff, and let me know what you'd like to see in the future. As always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and I will talk to you soon.